She slept in her car to pay for college. Now, she owns the campus. The first thing Maya Rodriguez noticed when she pulled into the parking lot of Westbrook University wasn't the Gothic architecture or the manicured lawns. It was the security camera mounted on the light pole, the same one she'd learned to avoid 15 years ago when she'd lived in her beat-up Honda Civic for 2 semesters. Now, as she stepped out of her Tesla Model S, wearing a tailored suit that cost more than her old car had been worth, Maya couldn't help but smile at the irony. The security guard who approached her didn't recognize her face from those long nights when he'd knocked on her window at 3 a.m. telling her to move along. How could he? The desperate 18-year-old sleeping under a pile of textbooks and dirty laundry had transformed into something else entirely. Ms. Rodriguez, the guard said, tipping his hat, the Board of Trustees is waiting for you in Hamilton Hall. Maya nodded, her heels clicking against the same pavement where she'd once done homework by streetlight, too proud to admit she couldn't afford campus housing. Today, she wasn't here as a student struggling to make ends meet. She was here to sign the papers that would make her the sole owner of Westbrook University. This shows Chapter 1, The Arrival. 15 years earlier, Maya had driven onto the same campus in a 1998 Honda Civic, held together by duct tape and determination. The car's odometer had stopped working at 237,000 miles, but she'd driven it at least 50,000 more since then. In the back seat were everything she owned: 3 changes of clothes, a sleeping bag she'd bought at a garage sale, her laptop held together with rubber bands, and a dream bigger than her circumstances. She'd gotten into Westbrook on a partial scholarship, enough to cover tuition, but not enough for room and board. When she'd called the financial aid office explaining her situation, they'd offered her more loans. More debt on top of the mountain she already couldn't imagine climbing. I'll figure it out, she'd told her mother over a crackling phone connection to El Salvador. Mija, come home, her mother had pleaded. College can wait. But Maya knew better. In her neighborhood, wait meant never. She'd watched too many brilliant kids get pulled into minimum wage jobs that were supposed to be temporary, only to still be there 10 years later, their dreams calcified into regret. So she'd made a choice that would have horrified her mother. She'd live in her car. The first night was the hardest. She'd parked in the student lot behind the library, reasoning that it would be well lit and safe. She'd hung towels over the windows for privacy and curled up in the back seat using her backpack as a pillow. Every sound, every footstep, every car door slamming jolted her awake. By morning, her neck ached, her back screamed, and she had to sneak into the gym just to shower before her 8 a.m. calculus class. But she'd made it through one night, then another, then a week. Daya, Chapter 2, The Routine. Maya developed a system. She'd rotate between 3 different parking lots to avoid suspicion. The gym opened at 5:30 a.m., so she'd wake at 5:00, drive over, and be first in line for the showers. She kept her toiletries in a small caddy that she could carry discreetly, and she'd learned which shower stalls had the best water pressure and which ones students avoided. Laundry was trickier. The campus laundromat required student ID cards loaded with money, and every dollar mattered. She'd wash her clothes in the sink when she could hang them to dry in her car overnight. When that wasn't enough, she'd wait until late at night when sympathetic work-study students might let her throw a load in with theirs. Food was another careful calculation. Her meal plan covered 10 meals a week. She'd chosen the cheapest option. She made those meals count, loading up on proteins and vegetables, sometimes discreetly wrapping extra food in napkins for later. The campus food pantry became her lifeline for everything else, though she had to time her visits carefully. Too often, and people would start asking questions. She studied wherever she could find free Wi-Fi and an outlet. The library until it closed at midnight. The 24-hour computer lab until her eyes burned. Sometimes, when security made their rounds, and she couldn't risk being in her car, she'd doze in the study cubicles, her head on her textbooks, setting quiet alarms every hour to avoid being caught. Her grades were impeccable. They had to be. Every A was a brick in the foundation of the future she was building. Her professors praised her dedication, not knowing that her dedication was really desperation dressed up in academic achievement. You're always the first one here and the last to leave, Professor Williams said after her economics class one day. That's the kind of work ethic that builds fortunes. Maya had smiled, not mentioning that she was first, because the classroom was warmer than her car, and she stayed late because she had nowhere else to go. Chapter 3, The Close Call. 3 months into her first semester, disaster nearly struck. It was November, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. Maya had layered every piece of clothing she owned, but her car was like an icebox. She'd been running the engine periodically for heat, but gas was expensive and she'd been trying to stretch a quarter tank for a week. She must have fallen asleep deeper than usual because she didn't hear the security guard approaching until he was tapping on her window with his flashlight. Miss, you can't sleep here." Maya's heart hammered as she sat up, trying to look like she'd just been napping between classes, not living in her car for months. "I'm sorry, officer. I was just studying and dozed off." The guard's nameplate read Johnson, studied her through the window. His eyes took in the sleeping bag hastily shoved to the floor, the clothes hanging from the garment hook, the collection of toiletries on the dashboard. "Some student ID," he said quietly. Maya handed it over with trembling fingers. This was it. They'd report her. She'd lose her scholarship. Everything she'd sacrificed would be for nothing. Johnson looked at her ID, then back at her face. Something in his expression softened. "It's not safe out here," he said finally. "There's a warming shelter on Madison Street. Opens at 8 p.m. "I'm fine," Maya said quickly. "Really, I've got a daughter about your age," Johnson interrupted. "She's at State. Can't imagine her." He trailed off, handing back her ID. "Look, I patrol this lot every night at 11, 2, and 5. I'd hate to have to write you up. You understand?" Maya understood. He was giving her a schedule. Times to be elsewhere. Times when he wouldn't see her. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Thank you." He nodded once and walked away. Maya sat in the dark for a long time after he left, tears freezing on her cheeks. She'd been seen. Someone knew. But instead of ending her dream, he'd given her a way to keep going. Dasha Chapter 4, The Innovation. The close call with security forced Maya to get creative. She couldn't keep living night to night, always one observant guard away from disaster. She needed a better solution. That's when she met Jamie Chen in her computer science class. Jamie was brilliant with coding, but terrible with economics. Maya was the opposite. They'd been paired for a group project, and during one late-night coding session in Jamie's dorm room, an idea sparked. "You know what drives me crazy," Jamie said, gesturing at her cluttered desk. "I've got all this stuff I never use, but I can't sell it because setting up meetings with random people is sketchy and shipping is a hassle." Maya looked around the dorm room at the mini fridge Jamie had mentioned, wanting to get rid of the textbooks from last semester, the clothes with tags still on them. Then she thought about her own situation. How much easier life would be with just a little more money. What if we built an app?" Maya said slowly. "Something just for college students, verified users only. You could buy sell trade stuff on campus, safe meetups, no shipping." Jamie's eyes lit up. "Like a marketplace, we could use student email verification for security." They stayed up until dawn sketching out the idea. Campus swap, they'd call it. Within a month, they had a prototype. Within 2 months, half the campus was using it. Maya handled the business side, marketing partnerships with local businesses, monetization strategies. Jamie handled the tech. The app generated modest ad revenue. But more importantly for Maya, it gave her a legitimate reason to be on campus at odd hours. Working on the startup became her cover story. She even convinced the entrepreneurship department to give them access to a small office space, a warm, safe place where she could occasionally sleep on the couch, claiming she'd been pulling an all-nighter. Their Chapter 5, The Turning Point. By her junior year, Campus Swap had expanded to 12 universities. They'd raised a small seed round from local investors, enough for Maya to finally afford a tiny studio apartment off campus. The first night she slept in a real bed, she cried for hours, tears of relief, exhaustion, and something that might have been pride. But Maya never forgot those nights in her car. Even as Campus Swap grew, even as she graduated summa cum laude with job offers from tech giants and investment banks, she carried that hunger with her. The memory of being cold and scared and determined became her fuel. She turned down the corporate offers and focused on building her company. Campus Swap evolved from a simple marketplace into a comprehensive platform for student resources, housing connections, textbook exchanges, meal plan sharing, for students who couldn't afford full plans. Every feature was something Maya wished she'd had during those desperate months. The company's mission statement was simple. No student should have to choose between education and basic needs. By the time she was 25, Campus Swap was valued at $50 million. By 30, it had become a unicorn, a billion-dollar company. Maya could have sold, could have cashed out, and never worried about money again. Instead, she kept building. That was Chapter 6, The Return. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Maya was in her corner office in San Francisco, reviewing expansion plans for Campus Swap's financial literacy program, when her assistant knocked. There's a Dr. Peterson from Westbrook University on line 1. Says it's urgent. Maya knew Dr. Peterson. He'd been her advisor, one of the few professors who'd seemed to sense she was struggling with more than just academics. He'd never asked directly, but he'd made sure she knew about every scholarship opportunity, every paid research position, every resource available. Now, Maya, his voice was older, now tired. I'm calling with an unusual proposition. Westbrook is in trouble. The story came out in pieces. Declining enrollment, years of financial mismanagement, mounting debts. The board had tried everything: fundraising campaigns, program cuts, partnerships with for-profit education companies. Nothing had worked. The university that had given Maya her chance at a future was 6 months from closing its doors. We need a buyer, Dr. Peterson said. Someone who understands what this place means. Someone who won't just turn it into condos or a for-profit diploma mill. I thought of you. Maya was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. She thought about that scared 18-year-old sleeping in her car, dreaming of a future she could barely imagine. Send me the financials, she said. Chapter 7, The Negotiation. The numbers were worse than Dr. Peterson had implied. Westbrook was hemorrhaging money held afloat only by emergency loans with crushing interest rates. The infrastructure was crumbling buildings that hadn't been updated since Maya was a student technology systems decades out of date. Maya's CFO thought she was crazy. It's a money pit, he said, spreading the spreadsheets across her desk. You'd be better off starting a new university from scratch. But Maya wasn't looking at just the numbers. She was seeing opportunity, a chance to reimagine what higher education could be, to build something that serves students like her brilliant, driven, but locked out of traditional paths by circumstances beyond their control. She assembled a team, education experts who'd been pushing for reform, technology innovators who could modernize learning, financial aid specialists who understood that the current system was broken. Together, they crafted a proposal that was part acquisition, part revolution. The board was skeptical at first. Who was this young woman proposing to buy their 150-year-old institution? But as Maya walked them through her vision, a university that combined traditional academics with practical skills, that used technology to reduce costs, while improving outcomes that treated housing and food security as educational issues. She could see minds changing. Thought I've slept in my car in your parking lot C, she told them during the final presentation. I've showered in your gym at 5:30 a.m. I've stretched 10 meals a week into survival. I know exactly where this institution fails its students, and I know how to fix it. The room was silent. Board members who'd been prepared to pepper her with hostile questions sat stunned. Finally, the board chair, an elderly woman who'd graduated from Westbrook in 1962, spoke. When could you start? Said Chapter 8, The Transformation. Maya took ownership of Westbrook University on a rainy Tuesday in March, exactly 15 years after she'd first arrived. Her first act as owner was to walk through parking lot C, where she'd spent so many nights. The security guard Johnson was still there, older now, closer to retirement. I remember you, he said when she introduced herself. Knew you'd make something of yourself. Didn't expect this, though. I owe you a debt, Maya said. You could have had me expelled. Instead, you gave me a chance. Just did what was right, he said gruffly. Students shouldn't have to live like that. No, Maya agreed. They shouldn't. Within her first month, Maya implemented emergency measures. She converted underutilized dormitories into affordable micro-housing, small but dignified spaces that students could afford. She expanded the meal plan options to include a basic tier that was essentially free subsidized by a slight increase in the premium plans. She created a transportation program for students who, like her, lived in their cars, safe parking areas, with access to facilities, support services, and pathways to permanent housing. But the changes went deeper than just addressing basic needs. Maya reimagined the curriculum, partnering with companies to create apprenticeship programs that paid students while they learned. She leveraged technology from Campus Swap to create peer-to-peer tutoring networks, textbook sharing programs, and skill exchanges. She brought in practitioners to teach alongside professors, ensuring students graduated with both theoretical knowledge and practical experience. The financial model was radical. Instead of relying solely on tuition, Westbrook developed revenue streams from its innovation labs, its startup incubator, its partnerships with industry. Students could opt to pay reduced tuition in exchange for a small percentage of their income for 10 years after graduation, betting on their success rather than loading them with debt. Chapter 9, The Resistance. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some faculty members resented the emphasis on practical skills, seeing it as a betrayal of liberal arts traditions. Alumni worried about the university's reputation. Local landlords protested the affordable housing initiatives that cut into their rental income. The pushback reached a crescendo at a town hall meeting 6 months into Maya's ownership. A professor emeritus stood up, his voice shaking with indignation. You're turning this institution into a trade school, he accused. Where is the respect for knowledge for its own sake, for the life of the mind? Maya listened patiently, then responded. Professor, I have deep respect for knowledge, but I also have deep respect for students who are choosing between textbooks and food. We can pursue truth and beauty while also ensuring our students can pursue careers. These aren't mutually exclusive goals. She shared her story publicly for the first time that night. The car, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, but also the professors who'd inspired her, the education that had transformed her thinking, the knowledge that had become the foundation of her success. I'm not diminishing what Westbrook gave me, she said. I'm trying to ensure more students can access it without sacrificing their basic human dignity. By the end of the meeting, even some skeptics were reconsidering. A young adjunct professor approached her afterward, tears in her eyes. I've been living in my office, she whispered. Showering at the gym. I thought I was the only one. Maya hugged her. You're not, and you won't have to anymore. Dr. Chapter 10, The Success Stories. Within 2 years, Westbrook's transformation was making headlines. Enrollment had increased by 40%. The graduation rate had jumped from 67% to 85%. Student loan default rates had plummeted. But the real measures of success were in the individual stories. There was Marcus, a former foster youth who'd aged out of the system with nowhere to go. The micro-housing program gave him stability, the income share agreement made college affordable, and the mentorship program connected him with alumni in his field. He graduated with a job offer from a tech startup and was able to immediately start saving money instead of paying off loans. There was Sophia, a single mother who'd been trying to finish her degree for 8 years. The flexible scheduling options and on-campus childcare, another Maya innovation, allowed her to finally graduate. The university's partnership with local employers meant she had a job lined up before she walked across the stage. There was Chen, an international student who'd been sending most of his money home to support his family. The peer tutoring program allowed him to earn money while helping other students, and the free meal tier meant he could eat nutritiously without guilt. Maya kept a wall in her office covered with these stories. Letters from students, photos from graduations, updates from alumni. Each one a reminder of why she'd bought Westbrook. Chapter 11, The Expansion. Success bred ambition. Other struggling colleges began reaching out, asking if Maya could replicate the Westbrook model. She was cautious at first. Transformation wasn't just about money or systems. It was about understanding each institution's unique culture and challenges. But she couldn't ignore the need. Student debt had reached crisis levels. Mental health issues on campuses were skyrocketing. The traditional higher education model was leaving too many behind. Maya created the Westbrook Foundation, using profits from Campus Swap and the university to fund transformations at other institutions. The model was open source. Any college could adopt Westbrook's innovations without paying licensing fees. She hired teams of consultants, many of them Westbrook alumni, who'd lived through the transformation to help other schools adapt the model to their needs. Within 5 years, the Westbrook model was being implemented at dozens of universities. The Department of Education was studying it as a potential national framework. Maya testified before Congress about reimagining higher education financing, her voice steady, as she remembered the girl who'd been too ashamed to ask for help. Chapter 12, The Full Circle. 10 years after taking ownership, Maya stood at the podium for Westbrook's commencement ceremony. In the audience were 3,000 graduates, none of whom had to choose between education and survival. The valedictorian was a young woman named Elena, who'd spent her first semester living in her car until the university's housing program had found her, supported her, and helped her thrive. Then I stand here today, Elena said in her speech, because this university saw me not as a problem to be managed, but as potential to be nurtured. Because our president knew that brilliance doesn't always come in conventional packages. Maya thought about her own graduation, how she'd stood on this same stage, wearing a borrowed dress because she couldn't afford to buy one. How she'd looked out at an audience that included no family her mother couldn't afford the trip from El Salvador. This time, the university had flown in family members for any graduate who couldn't afford to bring them. The auditorium was packed with proud parents, grandparents, siblings from around the world. After the ceremony, Maya walked through campus, past the new Student Success Center, built where old administrative offices used to be, past the innovation labs where students were already working on their next startups, past the micro-housing units where no student had to hide their poverty. She stopped at parking lot C. It looked different now. Solar panels provided covered parking and electricity for student vehicles. There were clean, safe facilities available 24/7. Support services were discreetly available for any student in need. A young man was sitting in his car, textbooks spread across the dashboard. Maya knocked gently on his window. He rolled it down, looking worried. "Just studying," he said quickly. "I have housing, Like the quiet, Maya finished. "I get it. I used to study here, too." The student's eyes widened in recognition. "You're President Rodriguez." Just Maya," she said. "And you are David, freshman, engineering major." "And a good choice. The engineering lab is open all night, you know. Better light than the parking lot." David smiled sheepishly. "I know. Sometimes I just need to be alone with my thoughts." Maya understood that, too. "Well, David, if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, my door's always open." As she walked back to her office, Maya reflected on the journey. From sleeping in her car to owning the campus. It sounded like a fairy tale, but she knew better. It was a story of systems that failed and people who didn't, of hunger that drove innovation, of desperation that became determination. Ames, epilogue, the legacy. 20 years after that first night in parking lot, Maya Rodriguez had transformed not just Westbrook, but the entire landscape of higher education. The girl who'd hidden her homelessness had become a billionaire philanthropist. But more importantly, she'd become proof that the circumstances of your birth don't have to determine the scope of your dreams. Campus Swap had evolved into a global platform supporting students across 6 continents. The Westbrook model had been adapted by over 200 institutions. Student homelessness on American campuses had dropped by 70%. The income share agreement model had given millions access to education without crushing debt. But for Maya, the sweetest victory was personal. Her mother, now retired and living in a house Maya had bought her, finally got to see her daughter receive an honorary doctorate from Harvard. As they sat together at the ceremony, her mother whispered, "I'm sorry I told you to come home. If you hadn't," Maya whispered back, "I might have listened." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She found herself driving not out of necessity now, but out of nostalgia. She pulled into a parking lot at Westbrook and sat there remembering the cold, the fear, the exhaustion, but also the hope, the determination, the absolute conviction that education was her path out. A security guard approached, not Johnson, who'd retired to Florida on a pension Maya had personally ensured was generous. This was a young woman, probably a student working nights to pay her bills. "Everything okay, President Rodriguez?" "Just remembering," Maya said. "Did you know I used to sleep in this parking lot?" The guard's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really, scariest and most important time of my life." "Is that why you changed everything?" Maya smiled. "We don't change things because we want to be heroes. We change things because we remember what it felt like when they were broken." The guard nodded, understanding in her eyes. Maybe she had her own story, her own struggles, her own dreams that seemed impossibly distant. "Well," she said finally, "I should finish my rounds. Have a good night, President Rodriguez." "You too, and remember my door is always open." As the guard walked away, Maya took one last look at the parking lot that had been her bedroom, her study hall, her refuge. Then she drove home to her actual bedroom in her actual house, grateful for every comfortable night's sleep, because she'd earned them all in the back of a Honda Civic with 237,000 miles on it, and a dream that refused to die. The next morning, she would wake up and continue the work. Another university to transform, another barrier to break, another student to lift. Because Maya Rodriguez had learned that true success wasn't measured in the height of your rise, but in how many people you brought with you. And she was just getting started.